was 18, and to mistake what he wrote in those letters as something other than a brilliant fiction writer's construct of who he might like to be, what he might imagine if we were characters in a story, not human beings living out their lives beyond the page. Introduction. When I was 18, I wrote a magazine article that changed my life. The piece was called An 18-Year-Old Looks Back on Life. It was published in the New York Times Magazine, with a photograph of me on the cover. In it, I described growing up in the 60s, expressing a profound sense of world weariness and alienation. I spoke of wanting to move to the country and get away from the world. Retirement sounds tempting, I wrote. Among the hundreds of letters I received after the article ran was one expressing deep affection for my writing and concern that I might be exploited in the months and years to come. J.D. Salinger wrote to me from his house high on a hill in the country where he had retreated many years before. I embarked on a correspondence with Salinger that spring. I fell in love with the voice in his letters, and when school got out, I went to visit him. Within a few months, I left college to move in with him. For most of that year, I lived with him in extreme isolation, working on a book and believing, despite the 35 years separating our ages, that we would be together always. Shortly before the publication of my book, Looking Back, the following spring, J.D. Salinger sent me away. I remained desperately in love with him. For more than 20 years, I revered a man who would have nothing to do with me. J.D. Salinger was, for me, the closest thing I ever had to a religion. What happened between us shaped my life in many ways long after he left it. But I put the experience away, just as I'd put away the packet of letters he'd written to me. I endeavored to move on with my life. A month after I left Jerry Salinger's house with money I'd earned from the sale of Looking Back, I bought a farmhouse on 50 acres at the end of a dead-end road in a little town where I knew nobody. I lived there alone for 2.5 years. I got a job as a newspaper reporter in New York City. I fell in love and married. My husband and I had a child, and then 2 more. We built a pond on our land where, winters, we would skate together in the moonlight. My husband made paintings, sometimes of me. Then he didn't paint me anymore. I published magazine articles and books. I worked hard, drove carpools, cooked meals, went to hundreds of soccer and Little League games, read to our children and played with them, and sat on the beach with my eyes locked on the tops of their heads in the water. My husband and I fought and struggled to stay together. My father died. I wrote a lot of magazine articles and newspaper columns to support my family. I cared for my mother when she was dying and fought so bitterly with my sister about our mother's care that I could not attend the funeral. That week, my husband and I parted. I left the house at the end of the dead-end road. My husband and I didn't fight over the house, but we went to war over custody of our children. I fell in love again, and when that love affair ended, I loved other men. Some of them were good choices at the time, some terrible. I made a new home. I made good friends and lost some. I wrote another book. My sons taught me how to throw a baseball. My daughter hung roses over her bed and taught me by her own example what it is to be a hopeful and optimistic person who greets the world with open arms. I had forgotten how. I planted flower gardens. We got a dog. I taught many women and a few men how to bake pies the way my mother taught me. I swam long distances across many New Hampshire lakes and ponds with the crawl stroke learned from my father. I turned 40. I sold a book I'd written to the movies and worried about money a little less for a while. I wrote another book. Now and then I still got so angry about some relatively minor frustration that I would dump a gallon of milk on our kitchen floor, but it didn't happen as much anymore. My sons grew taller than I was. My daughter knew some things I didn't. I sold the house I'd bought after my marriage ended and laid most of our possessions in the yard, had a giant tag sale, and then moved with my children to a town in California where we didn't know anybody. We made a new home and new friends there. That was 2 years ago. Because I have frequently made myself a character in my work, I wrote about most of these experiences. More and more over the years, I learned to trust my readers with the